Welcome to the Fiffe Files. I'm Michel Fiffe, cartoonist, creator of Copra, Panorama, Sagas, Negativland, tons of comics. I am your host, and I'm also a fan of Keith Giffen, which explains this massive retrospective of the late, great Keith Giffen, cartoonist, mega collaborator, creator of Lobo, just Ambush Bug, tons of creations. Now, the first episode was massive. We just went from the very beginning, and that what I'm trying to do with this project is map out his style development and see, and because he worked for so many decades on so many titles, there's a lot to cover. And so the first episode was chaotic in that it went all over the place. He was figuring out his style, and I was figuring out where that style came from, because again, I'm just trying to trace the trajectory of where he went throughout all these years and for all the specific projects he did. And Keith Giffen, if I didn't mention it last time, his first, the comic he discovered was World's Finest 117, featuring an alien fighting Batman and Superman. He was born in Queens but lived in New Jersey. I believe he may have gone to SVA. He said that he went to SVA once. And then he broke into comics. He broke into comics primarily for Marvel at first and then DC, and he worked there for about 3 years. The lifestyle didn't agree with him. He apparently quit or walked off of Micronauts in a rush, according to writer Bill Mantlo, and disappeared for about 2 years until his wife hooked him up again with DC. DC gave him a second shot. He started doing backups for certain titles, certain anthology books, and then he got in the door at Legion of Superheroes, which changed his entire life. From then on, he went on to become a fan favorite and like a very distinct voice in the world of Legion and comics. And that's where we last left off, which was right when he was becoming a fan favorite to with Legion of Superheroes and writer Paul Levitz. They were the collaborative team and thrust in that title that made it the fan favorite that it was. Now, this was also in conjunction to the direct market coming up, which was comic book specific stores, whereas before comics were only really primarily in gas stations, 7-Elevens, pharmacies, places like that, newsstands. And so now with the direct market, it was usually run by fans for fans, and so DC and Marvel started putting out books specifically for this direct market. And again, we're gonna jump into that, but before we do that, I wanted to feature a couple things that I did last episode. Claw was one of the titles that Keith Giffen worked on, but I failed to mention that he also drew these covers. He wasn't really a cover artist back then, but he actually ended up drawing these two covers inked by Ernie Chan. And they look like Ernie Chan, and that's why I completely forgot that this is actually Keith Giffen penciling the covers of his own comics. He drew the interiors. We went over that briefly. Again, it would, like I said, it was chaotic because there were dozens and dozens of comic books, and I'm trying to cover as much of it as possible. Now, the effort here is to try to look at everything that got published, everything that was in print that Keith Giffen drew. So visually, he has a deep library. He ended up doing layouts. He's also written for books. He's done all sorts of other stuff. We're just covering the visual aspect of his career. And there's a lot to mine. Another cover he drew was this supervillain team up number 13, inked by Frankie Okoye. I might have mentioned that he penciled this, but I thought it was worth reminding everyone of that detail. Not too many covers in 2 or 3 years that he was in the business. Again, he was about 29, 30 years old. Pretty young guy, you know? And so here we come upon the Legion of Superheroes. Again, I just showed the cover because it's an interesting piece. It's a jam piece. And you have guys like George Perez, Paris Cullins, I believe that's Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, Howard Chaykin, and Keith Giffen drew Cosmic Boy, his favorite, and Prody 2. But he also drew the interiors. I mean, this is an anniversary Jam comic, so a lot of people drew it. But I wanted to show it off a little bit because it's also right before his shift in style, right? So he had a very detailed, clean, slick commercial line. I mean, so what that also that could also be attributed to Larry Malstead's slick inking. Larry Malstead was the series inker, and he really put it together. I mean, they were a great combination. But Keith Giffen's pencil work was also super commercial. He sort of tapped into what the fans liked. Him being a fan himself, he he was again. He comes from Kirby, but then he went on to do a little bit of Starlin, a little bit of Galassi, figuring out his own stuff as well. But the main thing is that he was adding a lot of detail to these things. So you could see here, it's just there's a lot of energy on display. And I mean, you got Dave Cockrum here, Kurt Chaffenberger, James Sherman. The older Legion artist came in for this issue 300, but Keith Giffen was the series regular. So he drew the some bookends, some pages here and there. We talked about the sort of ticks that he developed, such as vertical panels, uh, funny Dutch angles, which also is a Kirby thing, a Jack Kirby thing. Jack Kirby being, of course, the main architect of superhero comics as we know them, and the creator of so many characters. I mean, we all know Jack Kirby, and if you don't, you just pick up any comic you might own, and he likely had a hand in creating that concept. Jack Kirby was a huge influence on Giffen, but now he's sort of shedding that, and he's developing into his own. The lack of panel gutters, that's another tick that he latched onto early on. Lots of information, lots of data, lots of cool solutions to these storytelling beats, like a flare, high shadow, lots of color holds, which an inker's in charge of, but it's led by the penciler. In these assembly line comics, the penciler would just do the pencils and maybe make notes on the margins. See stuff like that. That these energy patterns are here. That would be a color hold. That's a great shot. And then here is a huge roster shot, double page spread of every Legion character. Not every Legion character, actually. One more thing about the creative process in Legion specifically is the series writer, Paul Levitz. The way he and Keith would work is that Paul would plot something. Eventually, he would plot it with Keith. So they would discuss a story. Keith would then take the idea home and work on the pages and draw out the paneling, the layouts, the designs, the flow of the story. And what made it funny working with Keith is that Keith would, in that process, change the story, right? So when Paul would receive the pages back for him to write a script over, he had no idea what he would like. The story had changed pretty dramatically. Um, and so that would keep things fresh. Not that it was frustrating, maybe it was at first, but that's sort of the basic template for their working relationship. It was a give and take. It was unpredictable. It seems like I don't know if you would be able to work like that with anybody unless you're close friends or unless you've worked with one another for a long time. So anyway, the panel right here, this double page spread, I mentioned that there's a lot of characters here, but the thing that broke Keith Giffen, in his own words, was the poster that he did featuring actually every character in the Legion roster. I mean, hundreds of characters. It was super long. I tried fitting it into this camera. That's the thing that made him recalibrate. He didn't disappear from comics the way he did the first time. He changed his style. I think that was the thing that changed his style. And so with issue 300, he did maybe 6 more issues, and they look sort of similar to this. He starts maybe losing a lot of as much detail as before, more detail than before. We went over this in the previous episode, but we land on this issue, this arc really, but it begins here with the Omen arc. It's it remained out of print for a long time, but this is I believe it's been collected. So I suggest you seek it out because it's interesting in that it starts off with his typical style, his typical slick mainstream commercial style. Really cool looking, really good stuff, and it lasts let's see, 5 pages. And from page 5, with this wild bombastic layout and drawing of a spaceship blowing up, Dutch angle, vertical application, and then it switches to this. And this owes more to Alex Toth than anyone else. I mean, the blocky figures, not blocky, not to say blocky as in like Kirby blockiness, but they're mostly shapes. They're just shapes. There's hardly any rendering. It's not quite cartoony like open line cartooniness, but there's a heft to these bodies, and the layouts are actually a little bit more experimental. And I believe that's the influence of Trevor Von Eeden and his Thriller run. When this issue came out, issue 307, at that point, Thriller had been out for a couple issues. The Green Arrow miniseries that Trevor Von Eeden drew with Mike Barr writing it had been out the previous year, and it had similar layouts, really wild layouts. This is, to me, this is all Von Eeden, and it's a phase of Giffen's that never gets talked about, never gets discussed, because Von Eden's work and influence is also sort of obscured by history. You see things like that. That's pretty inventive. Just the rain line. I mean, that's the inker also applying those lines. The lines are thicker. Everything's a little bit bolder. You get a little, a throwback to maybe his Dr. Fate days. It's a little thin, demonic, gnarly creatures, but it's really nice stuff. Now, I'm going to try to zoom through this, but I do want to drink in a couple of things because there's a lot to cover, but it's all worth the attention to detail, because I mean, this shift in style is important in the evolution of Keith Giffen's career, not only just this time period, but his general career is highly marked by this era. I think it's super interesting. Then there's also this Superboy anniversary issue where he's employing that style. He's, let's get this out of the way so we could just take a look at it. Again, another anniversary issue, another anthology type of title, but he draws the bookends. And again, the layout's kind of fun. Lots of sound effects, lots of weird application of lines. Still pretty bold, pretty bold. I know in the previous episode I mentioned that his profiles are one of his staples. And again, he owns it. He leaned into it. So these kind of things, that's pretty design heavy. You don't really see that in many comics of this time period. I mean, you might have seen something like that from Marshall Rogers a few years prior. Definitely Trevor Von Eeden. I mean, Von Eeden was the guy during this time. Anyway, so you have a lot of Kurt Schaffenberger here, old school Legion artist. And then you get back to Giffen, lots. I mean, that's pure Toth, just blocking, staging this panel with just silhouettes. You know what that is. You know what you're looking at. It's not confusing. It's pretty clear. It's pretty direct. So this is an early version of that. And you could see it here without any of the text. I mean, it's really tiny. I'll blow it up later for you, but it's worth showing it like that, just because it's just so cool. It's such a different approach. And again, the inker for this stuff was Dave Hunt. He went from Dave Hunt to Bob Oxner, and those two really gave it So, and the funny thing is they're both old school inkers, but they give it sort of like a fresh, updated polish, and it just worked. It worked for this new, different approach for Giffen. Now here's this version, a black and white version in this Amazing Heroes. It's just a preview, but again, cool to see in black and white. Not from the original art, just a stat. Thought it was worth mentioning. And I also talked about this last time, this Legion Outpost book, which reprints the old fanzines of the Legion Outpost. Impossible to find. If you have those, consider yourself lucky. Those are really cool looking from what I've seen online. And it features this art, which features that style, features this cover. This Overstreet comic book price update is just like a price guide back in the day. It's kind of like predates Wizard by about a decade or more than that. If you go back to the actual books, the thicker books, but for a spell they did single issues like this, and Keith provided one of these covers. Pretty clever, Shrinking Violet, Wildfire, Colossal Boy, and ranging in size and formats and what the comics that they're looking. But I think it's super cool to see it in black and white also, just to see that mark making. These little kind of thick, what seems to be markers. I mean, I'm sure it's a brush, but I think that's the influence of Alex Toth. Alex Toth inked like this for a while, and it rubbed off on Keith as he was doing his Trevor Von Eeden stuff for these issues. Again, this is part of the Omen storyline. So 307 to 311, basically. I mean, that's when you're really going to see some wildness. I mean, look at this. It's off the bat. Some of these issues are half issues. I believe it's because, schedule changes. The Baxter run of books, which I'll get to in a minute, is upon us. Classic, huge profile with insets. Either the rest of the scene or a flashback or some sort of related scenario to the big head in question. That's a Giffen trope that again has roots in Kirby, maybe Steranko, but you would see that a lot in the 90s, especially with the Image dudes. They would employ that method. I mean, great variation of panel sizes. I mean, it's all very design forward. It's all very fun. It looks very fun to draw. He's having a ball. He's recuperating from that huge poster that he drew. That's right. So this half is Tuska. The first half was Giffen, but the story continues. It's one storyline. And as you could see, it gets even more and more chaotic as you go along, which fits the story. It's a huge battle. Things quiet down, so they get a little bit more conservative, a little clearly. Great setting, by the way. That's something that's underrated in Giffen's work, which is his mastery of setting a mood, setting a place. He would eventually lock into this sort of claustrophobic approach, but it is all very clear ultimately. Sometimes he would throw you off on purpose, but stuff like that, just that setting was so beautiful, it was worth noting. Again, we're talking about Legion of Superheroes, which is just a team book set in the future of just superheroes fighting. It's a huge soap opera. It went head to head with the X-Men in terms of sales and popularity, and maybe even cult status. I mean, it went beyond cult. It had a huge following, had a huge fan base. Another half issue. Keith Giffen did the layouts for this, which is something that he would do. He did that for Alex Saviuk in the last episode. We covered that for DC Comics Presents. That's somewhat when it started, and he carried that over to here. That layout approach. Again, I think it's worth going through every page of this story because I mean, you get stuff like this. Obviously I'm a fan, but specifically these issues are worth seeking out. It's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And the printing's not bad. This mid 80s stuff. sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. You might get a bad batch of really thinned out line work. This is really solid, beautiful, crisp presentation. I mean, it's just it's great. It's so visually arresting and in service of this just super teenage superhero thing, this saga that's been going on for decades. Excellent. It's just, you know, so it seems like he hadn't lost his excitement for comics. Maybe not even Legion. He just probably just didn't want to approach it the way he did. He probably realized that he was putting so much work into the wrong things, into, you know, applying detail to the wrong places. Similar to John Byrne when he realized that he was just adding details to the wrong things and he wanted to concentrate more on drawing a better figure or something like that. So the fans of course were like, you should draw better, which meant is code for like you used to draw more detailed. So Giffen is sort of doing the same thing. He's definitely getting rid of tons of the detail, and the fans, from what I could tell, are noticing. They're not hating it, but judging by the letters pages, they're noticing a shift. Some of them are not crazy about it, but they're not rude. They're not outraged or anything. They're just sort of like, okay, we're gonna ride this out. We love Keith. We love Keith, and we trust him, and we're just gonna go with it. For some reason, maybe the way this was inked, this side panel of the ship looks like it might be a little older. Maybe it was an inventory ship picture that they just thought they would include somewhere they needed to fill in a page. I could be wrong, but it just ink wise, it looks different. But it has been reprinted before, or in that time period, in this little book, just for comparison's sake. Doesn't look too bad, small, but you know, as I mentioned before, these digest sized books are murder on the eyes. They're cool looking, but man, I dare you to read this. But they have great covers. Like this, for example, this cover right here, it's by Paris Collins. Paris Collins, front cover and back. Well, it's a double page spread, really, but you can't really do that to these books. It's great. Paris, fantastic artist. I'm glad I have this. It's cool to see that ship in there. But let's see. As for the continuation of Legion, we got a couple more issues until the big shift. And the big shift being the Baxter edition. But these issues still pretty neat. He's still employing that sort of Trevor Von Eeden unorthodox approach to panels. He's really packing it in, really. This isn't really your brisk solution to storytelling. It's just you know, you save some time there, of course. That's a given. But I mean, look at this. This is just there's so much information in this. He's not skimping out on anything. He's drawing the hell out of this. The whole issue. This is not a half issue. The entire issue. That's issues 312 and 313. And this, by the way, this cover. There's a Great Darkness Saga cover that was also really cool. That and this one made me think. Made me reconsider the Legion. I was on the fence for a long time, and because of my love for Keith Giffen's work, this was a huge blind spot, and I had to dive deep several times. I had to give it a shot, mostly because of covers like this. Like this is just such a cool visual. I mean, if this was on the stands, you know, how am I not buying this? And that's exactly what a cover does. So he is a good cover artist. He does have some good, cool, innovative things happening. Again, it looks a little like George Tuska, who was also drawing backups here and there. But again, very Toth, very Von Eeden. That's going to end here. But the line approach, oh, there's the cover again. Really cool to see it kind of small. The line approach is he's not going back. This is it. He's not going back to that slick, over rendered style. He's moving forward. As we could tell, in these anthology titles. He was given a short story back here written by Robert Kanigher. He got to ink himself on this, which is a rarity. Very chaotic. You you really have to read this and pay attention to kind of tell what's going on. And I believe that was on purpose because I mean, it's just so dense. It's just all these marks. It's like some sort of puzzle or something. You just have to sort of go with it, trust it. But it's cool. The lack of gutters, that's something that he's really going for here. Like this is where it's solidified. And by the way, I am going in chronological order of how things were published in general. Sometimes I'm clumping all the certain titles of certain covers or certain backup, like a stretch of backups. I'm gonna I'm gonna cluster those just for clarity's sake because last time it got a little. That's what I meant by it was chaotic. It was just a lot. It was a lot to cover. Anyway, this Doctor Fate story was given to him because naturally he's associated with Doctor Fate at this point. He inks this himself as well. Very moody, shrouded in black. Very cool. Still pretty inventive layouts, but snaps back into the gutterless page. This is like a solid unit of information. It could make that could be confusing sometimes if used poorly. If somebody else would use it, he manages to make it work. But he really that became a sort of a signature style of his. Not only in laying out the shots and the layout, the shots and like staging a scene, but in this specific type of layout. Anyway, that's it. It's only a few pages, handful of pages. And the reason he's associated with Dr. Fate is because, like we covered last time, that was his second chance. Mike W. Barr, the editor, got him to do backups in the Flash. And we looked at the original issues and we looked at these reprints from this time period where he drew covers, brand new covers for this. But I wanted to take maybe another quick look at these because we sort of zoomed through it. So these are thinner lines. This is Gary Martin inking. Gary Martin, his approach to inking is so funny to me because it really ranges on artist to artist. Sometimes he flattens out an artist, sometimes he enriches the line work. It varies. For this, yeah, Martin as well. So thick, thin, it's a pretty interesting back and forth. But yeah, like we said, this is the promo piece, and then this series collects just all the backups that appeared in the Flash. So you get great splashes like that. He also drew this cover, which I believe I mentioned, which doesn't look like Giffen at all. It looks super rendered. Nothing really sticks out. This looks almost like a Rich Buckler drawing or something, or like based on a Neil Adams approach. Like it just looks odd. But the comic itself is just wild. It's really cool. It's got a lot of neat treatments for lettering, for color holds, which are these patterns that are or drawings just not in a black line. It's on another plate. You know, you draw this on an overlay or another sheet, and it's applied as color, not as an ink line. And so yeah, this is sort of what brought Keith back into the fandom's scope. Like he started showing up regularly in these backups. Then he started getting backups in the Legion. And then he became the Legion guy. And that's where it all started. Oh, there's another thing here I wanted to show. It's one of these covers shown. It's a small black and white version of this Gary Martin inked Dr. Fate cover. Just interesting to see because sometimes these colors could muddy something up, but they don't. This looks great. Something else worth mentioning is that he's also doing things like this. Well, let me see if I could just get the whole thing in here. It's just a promo piece, and I don't know what this was. I've seen it online. I looked it up. I got this print off of eBay, but I thought it was official. It's unofficial. It looks like some sort of bootleg thing. But it's fine. It was never officially released. I asked Paul Levitz about it. He doesn't even remember it happening, but I do recall Keith mentioning something about having to draw this promotional piece for the Superpowers line. Superpowers being the huge DC toy event from the mid 80s. And when they introduced the villains, I guess they got Keith to draw these Jack Kirby characters for some presentation or something, but an official poster was never released. This was never printed as a pinup or a cover or anything. And I also think this is when he met Jack Kirby for the first time. First and maybe only time, but he met him in the offices at DC when Jack came up to just look this stuff over because it's his, Jack had a hand in the Superpowers line, redesigning certain characters and whatnot. But I thought this was an interesting, weird thing. I don't know who inked this. I think Keith might have inked this himself. But anyway, we're here to talk about Legion. Legion is the one. Now, the Baxter series, Baxter, that's when it was just for the direct market, the stores. Whereas, like, this was the regular series. So, for a stretch, Legion of Superheroes and the New Teen Titans had two books at the same time, one for the newsstand audience and one with a different story altogether and different art and different price point for the stores. Now, if you were stuck in some city that just didn't have a comic book store and you wanted this, you would have to subscribe, or you would have to wait a year for this story to be reprinted, right? On cheaper paper at a lower price point. This only lasted about a year, but it was an interesting experiment. I want to compare that in a minute. But this cover to me is, I mean, it was everywhere. At first, it was printed in the back of this issue, which was kind of telling everyone what the change was. It's sort of a meta moment for Legion of Superheroes where they're describing the change and, you know, yeah, we have a new edition. It's going to be expensive, but it'll be worth it. And check it out. And, you know, that usually never happened in Legion of Superheroes. But that's what this was. And that's what this was the project that Keith Giffen was leading with Paul Levitz, of course. He was taking over. He was doing the prestige book, right? And it starts off pretty heavy. I mean, it's basically dozens of supervillains fighting dozens of superheroes. I mean, it's primal comics, right? Lots of costumes, lots of worlds, and that's the thing with Legion. It's not all humans. It's all different types of races and planets and ships and customs, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work. So I think between the poster and this Baxter series, I think that's what got him done with Legion for a good while, for a few years. But I think these are worth looking at. Obviously, the Baxter editions, like I mentioned last time, are superior to any comic book format ever that you could think of to this day. I mean, look, this comic is from 1984 and it still looks crisp. The lines are faithful, the colors pop. It's just beautiful stuff. Just perfect little units of comic books. There it is again, reprinted in its own comic. You know you've made it when that happens. The layouts themselves, they're pretty wild. They're not Trevor Von Eeden crazy, but they're still pushing for something. They're still trying to be interesting. That's another thing about these books is that they're extra pages, not your standard 22, but it would give you 24 up to 28, sometimes in the 30s. And when you have it here, it's just a different. It just changes the mood a little bit. it's not a considerable mood shift, but it is curious to note that the printing is just something else, you know? It's not too bad. It's a little smaller. The gutters are huge. And for this issue, it's the same cover, but they usually would employ somebody else to do a brand new cover. So that's usually why I get those, just because they have beautiful covers by Steve Lightle and some, Ernie Cologne, or they had a good roster. The Legion offices had a good roster of people. You also see this. That's the wildfire from the cover. I just want to show this because it was a ubiquitous image, and that's really where I first saw it. I was like, role playing games and what is that, and a Legion of Superheroes and a source book. Like, I had no idea. I was just trying to read my Booster Gold comic. You know what I mean? I had no idea about Legion or anything. There's also this. Before I go, there's this poster. Pretty neat. I'm sure this was sent to every single store on the house, as comic book publishers do. And it's just a cool image. It's sort of a classic image for the Legion. So anyway, that was Keith Giffen on the first issue and the second issue. And this would be the last. Inked by Larry Malstead. Inked by Larry Malstead, who was inking his previous work, gave it that slick look on the previous stuff, but he it was a pretty good combination for this new version of Keith also. You kind of knew what the shift was. I don't know if they talked about it. I don't know how close they were, but it seems like they were pretty compatible. Again, this is that issue. Same issue, different printing. Came out a year later for all the fans who just weren't close to a comic book store. And there were a lot of comic stores back then, but sometimes if you miss it, you miss it. But if you really wanted to, you would subscribe. Anyway, this is the last issue by Keith Giffen. And by the way, I should mention something, a huge topic that's coming up. But just to note the difference in mood and approach to some of these faces, to some of these bodies, just notice this stuff, right? We're going to be talking about that. Just the characters get a little, not cartoonier, but they get very specific. There's a treatment to it. Oh, I failed to point out this fashion. It's great. Just that's a funny thing about future books. It's like you're really just applying your current fashion to the future. And in this case, this isn't 1984 fashion. This is about 10 years old. So it's just a charming mix of sources. Okay, so Keith Giffen, he got to issue 2 and he bailed. He was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I just can't. Sorry, Paul. And Paul's like, what do? We already have the solicitations in, the catalog has our information. People ordered issue 3 because they thought you were the artist. You were lined up to be the artist. You even drew the cover. What are we going to do? And so what they did was they hired this new dude, Steve Lightle, to draw it based on Keith's layouts. And that's how they could justify having Keith's name in the credits. Now, they call it designer, but we later find out that it's a layout artist. You're doing layouts. That's what Keith would do. Here, designer, introducing Steve Lightle. This wasn't Steve Lytle's very first comic, but it is up there. I think he did New Talent Showcase a few times, had a few covers published, World's Finest, DC, just stuff. He had stuff, but he was a rookie and he was a big Legion fan, so they lucked out. And he had a super polished, slick approach, almost like a Dave Stevens level of like delicate attention to detail. In this really, I don't know, it's not delicate stuff. There's a delicacy to it, but it's very powerful. It's strong. It comes from comic book stock. He knows his comic books. but it's very illustrative. It's very rendered, but not overly so. Again, in the right places. But apparently these are Keith Giffen layouts. So what I imagine is that these would be maybe even stick figures. But it what that does is that allows Steve the opportunity to just sit and draw. He just takes the layouts. He doesn't have to think or consider or stage a scene. He doesn't have to read the script necessarily. I mean, I'm sure he does, but it just makes things so much easier. So Keith is now doing this. And I doubt he was doing layouts for himself. I've never heard of that, of a cartoonist doing layouts for himself that often, unless you're Kevin Nolan, who you do like 5 rounds of layouts before doing 10 rounds of pencils. To amazing effect, by the way. We love Kevin Nolan here. Love him. But this is issue 4. Keith Giffen cover. He's still drawing the covers for this mega arc. Spoiler alert, please turn this off if you don't want this spoiled. But if the cover wasn't obvious enough, Karate Kid dies. Keith Giffen really hated Karate Kid, and this was his opportunity to get rid of him just in time to leave. Like that wasn't very nice. That was befuddling. But that's what he did. That was the story. And again, look at this. This is great Steve Lightle, but this is just to show the layouts, Keith Giffen. This is Keith Giffen's pacing, is what layouts means. He's the one who dictates the scenery, the staging. And I don't believe he was strict. Ultimately, he wasn't a strict layout artist in that it was suggested. It wasn't it wasn't the law. You were free to do your own variation, but what he gave you was like enough information to make the story move along, make things clear, and make things compelling. When to make a splash page, when to slow things down, and so on and so forth. And that's what this is. Steve Lightle drawing the hell out of this Keith Giffen layout. And that's what the Baxter era is. That's how it started. And then there's also this comics interview with a great, nice Dan Jurgens cover that shows a little bit of Keith Giffen's art in black and white. Lots of Legion stuff. It's worth getting this. I mean, I love the Legion from this era. I mean, again, it took me a minute, but once I was in, I was in. We're gonna go through a couple of random Legion related things. Now, this is the second sampler from DC, a free sampler, which showcases upcoming books with original art or original compositions for this comic. Garcia Lopez, George Perez, the Swamp Thing team, Chuck Patton, Aparo. These are great. You could find them. Alex Nino. But the Giffen one is this. Pretty in that new style. Like it's still really detailed for this mural and these tiny panels. But it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun to look at. I mean, last time he did a sort of collage of panels denoting all the different themes that the Legion could encompass. This is just a fun little thing. It's not a reprint. None of this stuff is reprinted. Then he drew this cover. It's mostly a Kurt Swan. This is the third Legion of Superheroes annual, mostly drawn by Kurt Swan. But he drew this this epilogue. I believe he inked himself too, because that just looks like his ink line, which again he rarely did. It was kind of craggy. It's a little craggy, such as that Doctor Fate story we saw in the back of the JSA annual. But it's pretty cool. He gets to draw Darkseid one more time. Then we pivot to Thunder Agents. This is something that he drew. I'm going to show these all at once, but they came out really sporadically over the course of a year. I mean, this Deluxe Comics is this publisher. There's something weird about it. It's a lot to unpack. And for the purposes of this show, we're just going to look at the visual aspect of it. But there's some sort of drama here. A lot. lot whatever. George Perez cover, George Perez story, Ditko. It's got Ditko, got Cockrum, and then this is the Giffen stuff. This is what I'm talking about. This change in style and faces, this mark making. It's more than just Toth. It's a very specific approach. This character is very, very specific, and you'll see why in a minute. No gutters. Very weird. Very just kind of mysterious, obscure mark making. Next issue, issue 2. This lasted for about 5 issues. It's a story of the Thunder agents being hunted, and one of them is coming back, and pretty interesting, profile body shots, and then their history on the side. It's all very cool. You can see how this is like a side thing. He just kind of did semi quickly. Big reveal. Should have been on the other side, but I don't think he was up to that, or that he cared about such things. But the interesting thing about this is that it is written by Tom and Mary Bierbaum, who will go on to write the Legion of Superheroes, the super polarizing 5 years later Legion of Superheroes, which I love to death, and I will talk about why when we get to that part of Keith's career. But for now, Keith wanted to he knew them from the Legion Outpost days. He knew them from Legion fandom, so he gave them a shot. He was always good about that. He was always good about getting together with young creators and giving them a shot, giving them a chance, because that's what was done to him. He was good like that. He wanted to work with them. Something for them to test their skills on. They had never written comics before, at least professionally. But there's some cool looking pages here. Lots of text, very heavy on the text. That's something they would later shift a little bit. But again, these are hand colored now. This issue came out, I think, a year after the fact. Interesting use of copy and paneling. He's pushing it. Keith is pushing it. And then nothing happens. This is to be continued, but nothing happens with this series. They go out of business. It never gets completed. In this comics interview, he talks about all the stuff I just mentioned. There's a piece from him, but this interviews the Bierbaums for the first time, at least in a professional setting, not a fanzine. I'm not sure if they were interviewed in the fanzines back in the day, but here they are. They're a writing team, a married couple writing comics. I believe Tom wrote for Variety or Vanity Fair. He was a writer, but this was his first comic. They're Thunder Agents. He's a good Giffen interview. He's not scowling. He's not smiling. He's sort of in the middle. He's right in the middle of that, which is great. You never see pictures of Keith. He's always self-deprecating or drawing himself with a bag over his head, stuff like that. That's interesting. This is talking about his world's finest. Now, I did things with Batman. Somebody's going to do that with what I did and be claimed a genius. Now, interestingly enough, he did draw a cool Batman, as you could see here, but it's pretty braggy. It's pretty interesting. He's not like that. Like in the previous interview from the first episode, he's joyful. He's enthusiastic. He's very careful about not being called a plagiarist. But now he's it's not that he drank his own Kool-Aid, but he knows he's a hot ticket item. He knows that he's doing cool shit and people better notice. And if they don't, then that's their loss. And we're talking about Ambush Bug, which we are at the brink of Ambush Bug fever. I wanted to show this though. This ad for Comics Buyer's Guide, drawn by Keith. This is for this issue 573. It's a house ad. Has never been reprinted. I think it looks cool. It's in that style. It's not really quite. It's in that middle style. It's like post Toth, post Von Eeden. It's simpler. It's bolder, and it's just neat to see in newsprint. legitimate newsprint. He also drew a couple things, couple backup stories, and they're like funny stories, you know. They service his funny bone. It's just lack of gutters, pretty good comedic timing. That's very reminiscent of like early Keith, just one of those ugly monsters. There's the punchline, bigger monster gets him. Ink by Ernie Colon. This is a Blue Devil fill-in. He didn't draw the cover, but he drew the interiors again with Gary Martin as inker. Not too bad. You could see, you know, the that Dutch angle was talking about. He's doing that less and less. I know his early work is jam packed full of those funny Dutch angles. Again, I don't know why that amuses me so much, but it does. It's just so over the top, sometimes for no reason. And I love that. I love that stuff. So yeah, this is just a fill-in that, you know, if you blink, you miss it. It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. It's for the Giffen completist in you. But then we get to Ambush Bug, who was introduced prior in DC Comics Presents. So now that he's done with Legion, he's like, well, let me see if I could just dust my old character up and go in that direction, go in the funnier direction. And so Julius Schwartz, the editor, was in charge of the Superman lines, and he loved Keith. He loved Keith's sense of humor and his style, so he just gave him a few backups. Keep this in mind. This setting, it's very specific. This panel cluster, this is when it's like, I feel like this is it. That like he's just moving forward with this style. Drew some covers. He draws a nice Superman. Before, when he would draw Superman, he would draw him in almost this older style, you know, a Joe Shuster style from the Shuster Siegel era, you know. But this seems to be his own. This seems to be like his own, just a big beefy dude. He's not trying to ape anyone's style here. He drew the frontal one right here. Let's see. I think there's a Perez. Yeah, that's a George Perez panel from the Titans. So that's a sort of in joke sort of thing. Again, this is funny stuff. This is just Ambush Bug kind of taking the piss of on comics and comic tropes. Not as much as he will, but it's just sort of he's kind of flirting with that. Now I got to say this is a big book for me because this was the first time I really saw Keith Giffen, and I recognized him as a name, as a style. I didn't buy this off the stands. This was like came from a friend of a friend and trading comics back in the day. But I was for you know opening stories is fine. It just looks like an old fashioned kind of story, and it's cool. But this is the thing that really got me. Like I had no idea what I was looking at. It just seemed like it goes from a funny interaction between Ambush Bug and Superman to like a Kirby homage, back to like the same thing with Batman, then some weird non-cover for a non-team. Man, I would love to pitch the Uh-Oh Squad. When's that coming back? I mean, come on. I mean, look at that. You're gonna tell me I wasn't influenced by that? Look at Miss Mohawk. Come on. Wonder Woman, that crazy treatment, and then this final scene of just absurdity. It's just I loved it. I loved it. I was like, I need more of this stuff, and I would slowly, you know, I had some comic book stores available to me, but I would slowly collect my interest, and Keith was one of them. But this was major for me. This was a big one. But in the world of Ambush Bug, he got those three short stories, and then he got his own issue in DC Comics Presents, a full issue of just this level of mayhem. You know, making fun of Superman. They swap bodies. It's all goofy fun. It's super thick. I mean, these are thick drawings. Just the mark making here is it's almost like you get the fattest marker and that's what you ink with. And there's something really cool about that. There's something immediate about it actually. It's not thin or scratchy or messy. There's just something, I don't know. There's something visceral about it. Good solution to a splash page. Get it? It's a good gag. And and then that's it. He would do stuff here and there. Again, probably another, yeah, it was a backup, kind of funny-ish with Bouncing Boy. Like this one, Carl Kiesel. Carl Kiesel, young inker at the time, and he was great. He still is. He's You put him with anyone, he'll make them look great, and he really makes Keith look like Keith, but gives it that pop. He really knows how to make it poppy. Crisp lines. I mean, it's like a comes from the school of, gosh, I don't know his influence. Probably Terry Austin or so. Don't sleep on the main story though by Ernie Cologne. Great Steve Lightle cover, Ernie Cologne, who drew his own cover for the reprint, the newsstand edition. Great cover, right? But again, we're here for the Giffen, so these pages are reduced. The printing's not as great. The coloring's a little splotchy. It's still interesting to look at. There's Ambush Bug, who will be making his appearance in a second. But first, he appears in Amazing Heroes. You got the cover. Now, this is you take. I mean, consider this. He's drawing this for Amazing Heroes, who also owns the Comics Journal. It's the same people. It's a different type of magazine. Comics Journal's more journalism, huge long interviews, um, direct harsh criticism. This is more not softer. It just the focus is different. It's very fan centered in that it has cool art, cool fan art. It's got updates on stuff, checklists. I talked about Amazing Heroes last time, and again, they both served a different purpose, but those are great purposes, both of them. Very important. It's just funny that he would draw his second Amazing Heroes on the eve of the Comics Journal take on his work. Now, before we get to that, this is it. We're here. We're promoting the hell out of Ambush Bug. I believe that's Mark Wade, who was working at Amazing Heroes at the time. You get to see a lot of cool Keith Giffen art in black and white. A lot of stuff that you'll be seeing. That's the iconic cover, which will be reprinted everywhere. You'll see it in all versions of everything. And it got 4 issues. This is another thing that came not really from the direct market, but the direct market really made a home for miniseries to be possible. Something, a concept or a character wouldn't really sustain a series, it would be given a miniseries or maxi series. In the case of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, again, the gags, it's just sort of like absurdist randomness. It's really pushing the form. It's almost like a Mad Magazine level of like, who gives a crap? We're just going to make fun of everything lovingly. Nothing's mean, nothing's mean spirited. It's oftentimes self deprecating. I got to say, this is written by Robert Loren Fleming, another young creator, the writer of Thriller, the co creator of Thriller. And again, Keith took to him and they collaborated on tons of books. Tons of books. Now, I bring this Blue Beetle out because it features, I mean, this is really my insane attention to this stuff, but there's a version. And again, I would see this ad all the time without having read Ambush Bug. But then I saw that issue of Action Comics, and it'd be the same. Where is it? There it is. It's funny how like this is clear and this drops out. This is clear and this drops out. Printing is so random, and I like both of them, but I like parts of others more than, it depends on like what kind of book had the better paper or the better batch that month or that week. This Amazing Heroes talks about Ambush Bug. So that's a preview. But by the way, this Amazing Heroes with a Jaime Hernandez cover, the reading X-Men Titans American Flag. That's really neat. But also, it talks about the Thriller Summer Special. Now, Thriller ended in issue 12. That itself is a huge story as well, behind the scenes. And Keith really loved it. I mean, you could tell already that he loved Trevor Von Eeden, but he really loved that comic book, and he loved Loren Fleming's work. So they were in talks of making a Thriller Summer Special, one shot, and then something else that had maybe a DC Comics Presents where Thriller would show up and team up with Superman and fight a computer virus or something like that. That might come into play later in something that actually did come out, but this never came out. And in fact, there was also a Salvo miniseries, Salvo being one of the characters in Thriller. There was a Salvo miniseries that Keith was going to lay out later in the 90s when Michael Golden was the one of the editors. But I hear that Golden, it just things fell apart. Golden wasn't an editor for much longer. Things just kind of like disappeared. And so it goes. But we almost had these things. But back to Ambush Bug. This is the 4 issue miniseries. I mean, this is issues 2 through 4. And again, look at the mood here. This is Keith's getting into hot water with this. You know, it looks cool, looks neat, looks different, oddball stuff. This was a cult hit. I mean, this did well enough. Oh, this is coming up too. The Legion of Superheroes, substitute superheroes. This did well enough. Ambush Bug did to warrant follow-up specials and another mini. And that's the gag at the end of every issue is you have Dark Side. But the thing is, I remember hearing a podcast interview with Mike Carlin, editor Mike Carlin, who at the time was at Marvel, and he eventually became the big Superman editor. And he said, you know, he likes Ambush Bug fine. He thought it would be better served being like an in-house zine because he couldn't understand why anyone would care about this stuff. Why anyone would find it funny. I mean, I ate this stuff up. I mean, this is just great. This is just fun stuff. Again, it's not mean. It's not trying to take people down for size. It's just fun. And this is another style, like a chameleon thing that Keith has been doing, you know, as early as his that college book, Galumph, that we took a look at, where he was doing Von Bodie. Now he's doing other cartoonists, manga, European books, the Philippines. I mean, it's just fun stuff. Again, right here, Miller, Cologne, Gil Kane, Ditko. He again, it's all in the spirit of jolly, you know. I don't think he's trying to get away with anything. It just looks like a fun, cool comic. Very irreverent. This is perhaps his final connection to Thriller that saw print because this is actually the bad guy from Thriller, and he got to maybe redraw a couple scenes that Trevor Von Eeden drew. But he got, or those are actual Von Eeden panels down here. But this is a fun, kind of chaotic way of presenting this goofball story. It's great. Just throwing a pinup of Starfire. Great. And that's how it ends. Just like it's so unorthodox. It's so unconventional, and it's coming from a corporate company like DC Comics. That in itself should be worth noting. Like they were publishing this stuff, and they were a little adventurous when it came to like these kind of books. I don't know what the numbers are or how that works out, but I just find it interesting. There's that same cover, but black and white and smaller. Pretty neat. There's also the first Ambush Bug review, which was favorable. They liked it. They thought it was funny, you know? They didn't think it was a one note gag. He also Giffen drew the last issue of Atari Force. There was a backup, Hookah versus the Bob, right? Again, it's kind of like that previous stuff that we saw. It's kind of funny animal stuff, except this time there's some dialogue with a made up language, but it's still fun. And I bring this up also not only just to complete everything, but to show his popularity. Keith drew this cover and back cover of the year's best comic stories. Now, sometimes, it's an anthology of the better received, cooler stories that DC put out that year. And he's got, let's see, let's flip through it real quick. He's got that Blue Devil story, right, that he drew, inked by Gary Martin. He also has that squad, well, the backup in Action Comics that I first read. Not all of it, by the way, just a segment of it. It's just that's how random that it lends itself to this sort of reformatting. And the hookah story that we just looked at. So he's got 3 books in this best of, next to Alan Moore, next to Klaus Janson, next to Gene Colan. I mean, he's up there. He is a favorite. Dave Gibbons, he is a favorite. He is a fan favorite. DC recognizes this. He recognizes this. The fans love it. They eat it up. They're really pumping him to be this thing, right? And so he's given a special. He's given us a Legion of Superheroes substitute special with that same approach, sort of like funny goofball. These characters lend themselves to that treatment, but great visuals. I mean, this kind of harkens back to his earlier stuff too, in a way. Very fun stuff. Very fun application of action and shadow. And then the ambush bug aesthetic. We're just going to stick a random in joke memo in the middle of this page. It's a good way to get out of drawing an entire page. It's a good gag. Again, vertical panels, something that he used a lot and he hasn't been using as much. So this is interesting. Big monster head, like the previous Hookah story. And it's just a cool, fun one shot. Got Paul Levitz talking about it here in this editorial, which I love. I love letters pages when they just go off on either history or the artist background. I love stuff like that. Robert Loren Fleming wrote this Superman story that's only ever been printed in Germany. It's a digest, obviously, but it was written and drawn for the European market specifically. And only a couple of them got reprinted in the States. I think the 2 Gil Kane annuals that came out around that time, where they were specials, the Superman specials, were originally for the European market. But Germany printed this one. And this is one of Superman fighting Brainiac. Not really a computer virus, but sometimes I wonder if that's sort of where they were going with the thriller Superman story. This was autographed by Keith. I had him autograph this when I met him years later in 2018. And I asked him if there was any story behind this, and he said no. So there you go. I almost don't want to open it too much because the binding is so. I mean, this is in delicate condition, and it is great. There is one thing about this story. I mean, great opening, moody, creepy Superman, but this is marked by a lot of Jose Luis Garcia style guide art. At the time, DC put out a binder of just Jose Luis Garcia Lopez's art where he drew every character DC owned, and it was for licensees, for people to license those characters for pillowcases or lunchboxes or T-shirts, or if Superman had peanut butter, they would get a Garcia Lopez image of him flying. That would be one of them, with a Keith Giffen face. But around this time, you got to see a lot of DC comics have that. A lot of people use this stuff. Even Gil Kane, even Gil Kane, the mighty Gil Kane, fell under the spell of that style guide, which recently got released for the first time ever. Usually it was just an in house, sought out object, which would go for thousands of dollars on eBay if you could find it. If there was some old worker from DC who just unearthed it and wanted to get rid of it. Like that. That's a classic pose you'll see in tons of ads. That one. And maybe Keith figured, who cares? This is just a quick thing for the European market. Doesn't matter if it gets reprinted. That's fine, but I'm not going to waste too much time reinventing the wheel. There's that. There's Garcia Lopez with a classic blacked out face. That Keith Giffen. Well, he didn't start that there. He had been doing that. That started with the ambush bug stuff. But see, like this, where it's shrouded in shadow from the brow down, sometimes with just the nose sticking out. But all these little panels of just little Garcia Lopez swipes. It is a beautiful artifact. It's really cool to look at. And just the fact that it's such a rarity is really neat. And I do like to pull it out sometimes and just flip through it because it's cool. Now I gotta say, there are a bunch of not house, who's who issues, and I marked everything that he drew. And this was sort of like the Marvel Universe handbook, but the DC version. And so he did Ambush Bug. Let's see if I could give it more space because he did draw a bunch of them. Let's see. Ambush Bug, Bouncing Boy, Fire Lad, lots of lots of Legion. He also did Dr. Fate by Malstead. He got Malstead to ink him on that. Usually the artists ink themselves. This is Bob Oxner or whoever the series inker was. This has Claw, who he drew back in the 70s, and Computo, who whose the first issue that Keith Giffen plotted featured Computo, or this updated version of Computo. Now we got Chameleon Boy and Chlorophyll Kid. And there's also this RPG game, or the source book reprints that Bouncing Boy. And this 3-pack card reprints this Ambush Bug. So he is getting his work out there. People, DC loves his work. They are employing him. He's getting out there. He finally has an annual. He's back on the Legion. He's back drawing the Legion. Inked by Carl Kiesel. Again, they are they're a dynamite team. I mean, look at this. Again, on Baxter paper. This is inked, segments are inked by guys like Ernie Colon, but there's a lot of Carl Kiesel in here. Moody stuff. This is sort of what he was talking about when he was talking about the architecture of the Legion. Like he just really wanted to design this stuff. The Legion didn't the world of the Legion did not look like this prior. It kind of had more generic futuristic background, some cool looking stuff, don't get me wrong. But Keith really paid attention to all that stuff and giving every world its own distinct landscape. Now, in this Amazing Heroes preview, you could see the cover without the logo. And obviously, I find that fascinating. You know this about me. And some Thunder Agents art, which you never ever see in black and white. Oh yeah, there's the newsstand edition of the same issue with a great Steve Lightle cover. But it's the same story on newsprint, printed smaller for practical reasons. But I mean, it still comes through. an amazing one shot. It's a murder mystery. Or maybe not murder, but it's definitely a noirish type of story. Now I'm just going to go through a couple of things here. Again, this is Keith in an anthology issue of the Omega Men, an annual. Some issues do that too. Pretty subdued style, nothing too crazy, but it is fun to see him revisit the character. See, this is what I was talking about. That sort of shrouded face with a little nose, just doused in ink. It's a good solution if you don't want to draw a face. This is a wild comic written by Steve Englehart, and he finally got to draw the Creeper. He hadn't done that. He had plans to do that miniseries. That fell through. I think there are plans in the future to do more Creeper, but those fell through. So this is one of the few times that he had a hand in Creeper material. Now, these, again, very ambush bug esque background characters. He's carrying that forward. Please make note of that. Sort of wild layouts and approaches. Like, look at these buildings. They're very abstract. I mean, they're just almost suggestions of buildings. It's very funny. This sort of like stiff profile, which was uh, again one of his ticks, but when he draws it like this, it exaggerates that stiffness, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's really cool to look at it in this scope. Interesting, interesting. You like panel placement because it's like it's so open, but there's enough information. You don't feel like he's getting away with murder. Cool creeper, shadow, smile. Just he would have been perfect for the creeper. I mean, this stuff just sings. This stuff really sings. I would have loved to have seen him draw the creeper in the previous style that he had when he was angling himself to do the maxi series. And by the way, that's what DC called those books, mini and maxi series. I think Marvel called them limited series. This stuff matters. That's a Jose Luis Garcia Lopez style guide minus the face. And then this is when it gets nutty because it's there's some sort of creature, alien electrical creature, and it that becomes just like I don't know what that is, but that's one of the most amazing Keith Giffen drawings I've seen. I mean, what is going on? I mean, I know what's going on in terms of like Superman is punching something, but this mark making is incredible. Of course, I'm not saying like the whole thing should look like that. And if it did, that'd be awesome too, you know? But just that is so unorthodox. You don't see like that stuff like that in any comic of this stock, right? Like a superhero 1986, 1985, December 85, so almost 86. Things are getting experimental, but not quite so much. I believe this came out before Dark Knight #3. That's a pretty interesting silhouette. Speaking of Superman, I got this, which is the Batman that he was talking about earlier, of his super interesting, cool version of Batman, which, I agree. It's really just, there are no blues or grays. He's just a shape, just cloaked in shadows. And especially with this gutter loss, it's, this is a fight scene, but it's all just lines. It's all speed lines. It's very Bem, very Gilbert Hernandez Bem. And yeah, no one took the ball and ran with this style, with this approach. I think maybe Eric Larson might have drawn Batman like this once for a flashback maybe, but no one really did this. Even Keith himself wouldn't return to this style of Batman. He drew him in that ambush bug backup, but that's about it. I mean, again, he draws a really nice Superman, kind of based on the Toth version, inked by Terry Austin. That's really nice stuff. Oh, there's some Keith. Some Keith right here. And some Keith right here. There's that creeper. Creeper in black and white. and some substitute superheroes, Legion of Superheroes. This is for This Amazing Heroes. Got one more Amazing Heroes, which features that cover, the world's finest cover. Really small. Man, this print really gets dicey. Really small. That's on the right. On the left, you see Hell on Earth, a graphic novel with Robert Loren Fleming. It's an adaptation. But what's interesting is that this isn't the cover. This is the cover. This is the cover. What this little corner box, is the inside front cover. And this color approach annihilates this image. I mean, it just blows it out. It's unfortunate. It's still cool looking, but it is way cooler here. I mean, if you could take a look at it real quick, it's just very moody. It's creepy. It's nice. Hell on Earth is fantastic. What a great, I mean, talk about pushing the form. It's got this 16 panel grid throughout the whole thing. Similar to Dark Knight Returns, except Dark Knight Returns, because it's a comic book format size and not an album size like this, the panels look a little wider. They look boxier. They're not as thin as Dark Knight Returns. But Robert Loren Fleming adapted this story, and Keith was in charge of the visuals, of laying it out, of drawing it, of making it work, you know? And so what happens toward the end of it, it just becomes more and more experimental. You know, he really pushes things, you know, to sort of match the narrative. The colors too are amazing. I mean, yeah, Greg Theakston and Bill Ray. Bill Ray's an underrated colorist. I know he's a great cartoonist, but man, he could color. He could really color. Yeah, this is, I mean, he's really going for it. It's a really underrated book. If you could find it, I recommend it. Fantastic stuff. But Robert Loren Fleming, that's his guy. That seems to be his guy. They did the March Hare together, which was supposed to be a series, but again, this Lodestone was the company. And the less said about them, the better, because I don't know much about them, you know. But this is a kind of a noirish cop story. Oh, that's what we saw earlier. Sorry, I thought it was one of the substitute superheroes, Chlorophyll Kid or something. But no, that was that panel. Next issue never came out. However, this was in 1986. This was reprinted years later in the 2000s by some company that didn't last long either. And it looks thicker. It definitely looks like photocopies. And this was apparently greenlit by Giffen because they own the rights. So Giffen let them do this for whatever reason. Robert Loren Fleming wasn't, I don't think he's ever even seen this copy. And there's an ad in some comic down the line that suggests that there's going to be a third printing of this in color. That definitely never came out. That definitely does not exist. But anyway, they're a team. Robert Loren Fleming and him, they're a team. They're a dynamite team. One more thing from Ambush Bug in terms of comic books, because they got a special. He's got the mini. So now let's just try another special, holiday special. Same type of thing, you know, like citing other comic books, being goofballs, repurposing other people's style. Didn't Grant Morrison do something with this concept? I'm not sure. Yeah, making fun of Crisis. How could you not? That was like the big event. Yeah, that's the event that reshaped DC in a big way. Great Joker. That looks more like a classic type of cartoon Joker almost. There's also this, Don't Ask, which is a role playing game. And it's pretty interesting in that some these things don't usually have original art. They usually take art from the comics. These role playing modules. And by the way, this is the staff of this book. We never see this. It would only take like a fourth wall breaking project like this to even talk about these workers. I thought that was pretty hilarious and cool. But also, I think he might have drawn these. These might be original art. This might be the only time there's original art made for these kind of books. So he drew the cover, right? With great chorus line of Lex Luthor and Johnny DC and Phantom Hero, Phantom Stranger, and then this mask, this cutout mask. That might have been repurposed from something. I don't think he drew that, but I think he drew those. This kind of a fake Playboy type of interview. This is all very fun stuff. But again, usually I get these for the cover art. I've never played role playing games, but they look fantastic. And it's Ambush Bug. How could you not want that? A couple more things. There's going to be a Legion of Superheroes that he did. Again, just the backup. You know, again, not too crazy. When he gets on Legion, I guess he just kind of behaves a little bit. It's all very slick and beautiful. This was autographed by Greg LaRocque. When I met him a couple years ago, and it wasn't Albany Con. It was one of those upstate New York. Another one, not just Albany Con. And this is the same thing, just reprinted in the thing that came out a year later, a year after the fact. So he signed it outside, he signed it inside. Cause that's him. That's Greg LaRocque right there. Sleeping at the wheel. Got a couple of Mega Men, and these are pretty cool because they here, he only draws one page here. These are pretty significant right here because he only draws one page featuring this one character that was Lobo's partner, old partner, and he makes an appearance. And then this is the modern Lobo. If you'll recall, Lobo first appeared in some sort of like disco suit, a very skin tight purple and orange bodysuit, and he was still a badass. But that this was his the first biker version of him. That's what it's supposed to be. That's a funny drawing, though. I think that's pretty hilarious. This lettering, I believe that's Giffen as well, just doing his own letters here. But that's the new Giffen right there. That sort of light shot from underneath, that down light. It's, like hell on earth, just pushing the form, just making cool marks. Just for just a little story. It's just a quick done in one Omega Man 36 and 37. Then we got this. More of this gnarliness from Giffen, and yeah, more Robert Loren Fleming. Now, this character would later on appear in Justice League International, the Bwahaha years. Oh, which, by the way, wait, bear with me. This cover has Ambush Bug saying "bah ha 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 ha." Now, there's some debate amongst Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, the writer, as to who came up with "bwahaha." No one wants to take the credit. One of them says, "You came up with it." No, you came up with it. That's pretty close. I don't know if Keith wrote that or he wrote this copy, if it was Robert Loren Fleming, but it's just a W away from being the iconic Bwahaha Justice League. Anyway, I thought that was worth mentioning. That's where this character appears, this vampire sewer character. Again, this is very golden age. I feel like he's snapping back into the golden age era when drawing Superman. And of course his own modern take on it, but it's like a mix. It's a good mix. It's almost like when Steve Rude draws a character, you know what I mean? Like when he tries to get it, or Darwin Cook, they always draw the original source material first. Like that version is the version. And now that this is his take on Asterix, I'm just straight up using those characters. But again, pretty cool, interesting stuff for a Superman comic too. I mean, nobody was really doing that, and that's interesting to think about because maybe people wanted to do stuff like this, but they couldn't because they weren't a hot artist. Maybe no one even thought of doing stuff like this, of doing, wild stuff like the Hell on Earth or ambush bug irreverence or working with thunder agents. It just, or changing up your style willy nilly, and who cares what the fans think? This is just what I'm gonna do. That's super interesting. More who's who. I'm just gonna show them in a batch because it's like, well, there's the he drew the headquarters, but yeah, I don't know how, if he drew that, but that's what the credits say. Good shot of the Legion of Substitute Heroes. He makes them look so great, no matter what version. That's very Kurt Swan. That's a very Kurt Swan baby face. I think that's hilarious. Matter Eater Lad. Look at this color hold. Really cool color hold here. I got a Peacemaker here. Right there. Now, Peacemaker, that's another Robert Loren Fleming project that they were going to do. They were going to do, before Action Comics Weekly, there was a thing called Blockbuster, where that's where all the Charlton characters that were recently acquired were going to appear. And Fleming and Giffen were going to do Peacemaker, and a couple of those pages exist online. I suggest you seek them out. They will never be reprinted. Well, I don't know about never, but I doubt it, because the thing was incompleted. It just wasn't completed. Well, some of it was inked and lettered, some of it was just penciled, but they exist. Another project that never came to fruition was Campus, and there's an image of that floating around. I'll try to bring that up, but it's basically an Eclipso story. It's an Eclipso if it was like he was an imaginary friend of a kid in the future, or some dystopian setup. And they pitched it. They made some art. Keith drew a pinup type thing, and it's not that they said no. And they obviously didn't go with it because it doesn't exist, but they just never heard back. And in this setting, I'm sure they were just like cranking out project after project. So who knows? Who knows? Okay, so this is the shift. This is what I've been kind of dancing around because I just didn't want to get into it right in the middle of this discourse. But Keith Giffen, the reason he's a polarizing figure, and people either love him or hate him, is because of this article in the Comics Journal that came out accusing him of plagiarism. And ever since, he's been marred by that accusation. People use it as a barometer, you know. And I was unaware of this stuff back in the day. I was just enjoying this as a fan, you know. I just like seeing this weird version of the superheroes that I was into. I just liked the fact that something like that existed. Let me get some Giffen in here, though. I want to get some Giffen in here while I'm looking for this article. But the thing is, the main thing he was swiping from is José Muñoz, an artist who was doing some comics called Sinner. Now, Keith Giffen says he only saw photocopies, but he was also a Raw reader of the Raw magazine that was coming out. So either way, I'm sure he came upon those comics and absorbed them. By his own admission, he just really totally absorbed that style. So he claims that he never swiped anything, which is what swiping is. It's an act of pretty much just like putting, let's say, a drawing that already exists, put it on your table, and then copying it. You're not so much tracing it, but you're just directly drawing from it. Um, and it's an act that is not, it's people don't love that. Here you go. The Trouble with Keith Giffen. This is a huge expose in the Comics Journal. The entire industry would read this. It had a huge fan base. And so here comes this article saying, remember this panel from Ambush Bug? It's actually taken from José Muñoz, who, by the way, José Muñoz is an amazing artist. He is a true original visualist that everyone takes from. I mean, Frank Miller's Sin City comes from Muñoz, you know. Keith Giffen beat him to the punch in the mid 80s. He, let's say, let's try to track this. He burnt out on the Legion, hyper slick style, and he then went simpler in mark making, but wilder in layouts. That morphed into drawing weird characters in the background in the Muñoz style. And then he just turned to Muñoz. And you could see from these characters, like this Thunder Agents scene is actually just a character from Muñoz. It's just a wild comparison. And there's even a checklist of this article writer just going through it. I don't want to say it's character assassination, but in a way it is. But there's a case to be made. What I want to sort of unpack a little bit is the stigma of swiping. It's something that people do. It's sort of what I was talking about in the last episode, referring to Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. And I called it a cynical approach to making comics, and deservedly so. But I think Wally Wood would agree to that, because it was not about making art. It's not about making an opus or being true to your visual spirit. It's just about getting the work done. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then if you take that to a logical conclusion, swiping is fine. Um, if you get caught, it's embarrassing, but doing it, it's people do it all the time. You see the best of the best, they've done it. Keith Giffen did it with the Garcia Lopez things, examples from the style guide. He did it with a couple of Alex Toth panels. He did it with the layout style of Trevor Von Eeden. If you think of it, if you want to apply some sort of modern justification to it, you can, and sometimes I do. You're just an artist absorbing stuff, and that's what this culture is just full of. You're just reappropriating stuff to whatever end. It could be nefarious, it could be pure, but you're just doing that as a human being. You're just trying to do that. And when people call themselves or call other people pure original, that there's a case to be made that doesn't really exist. We're all just products of all these different influences. Sometimes they're stronger than others, right? And so what you have here is you have a cartoonist who's at peak popularity, getting paid a lot. He's a fan favorite, an industry favorite, and yet he's taking from another artist who's nowhere near as popular. He's unknown. Americans don't know him unless you're a reader of Raw magazine, but that's more for like the independent alternative scene. There, there's little crossover there. Keith Giffen is the crossover. So it took someone to point that out. Anyway, this came out, and things changed. Maybe not immediately, but they started changing. And maybe Keith Giffen started feeling gun shy or whatnot. But he started doing less and less artwork. I mean, he would do things for Mr. Monster, for example. That's sort of, it's an independent book. It's not high profile. He drew this thing that looks great too. I mean, lettered by Bruzenak. He has a relationship with Mr. Monster that would bear fruit later. But he would do some stuff like this. And also he would do stuff for Nexus, Mike Barron and Steve Rude's Nexus. He would do a fill-in issue featuring the Badger, which sort of makes sense considering the Badger is very ambush bug-ish. I don't know who came first. I think Ambush Bug came first, but Badger had his own comic first. Is that Tasmanian Devil approach of just like a shrouded face, just nothing else is shrouded except his face. I think that's hilarious. But again, like this is in the middle of Giffen figuring out how to move forward in the face of this criticism. And by the way, I love this ad in Elric. This ad, which is just a different treatment from the cover. but it's just cool to see colored without any backdrop. So he's still in the industry. He's still, he's not licking his wounds. He's not going away, but his profile is maybe adjusting. You know, he's got a couple pages here in this anthology series, Heroes Against Hunger, which is a benefit book that came out in '86. Yeah, we're now in '86. We're covering the years 1984 to 1986 this time around. So just a few years, but a lot happened. A lot has happened. Last time it was 75 to 83. So now we're going, it's a steady pace. There's a lot to cover. This is perhaps maybe his more prolific year. Well, who inked this? I don't know if it's, I want to say Coletta. Joe Staten. How dare I? That will happen soon. And I do want to talk about that at length. That's a good, I can't see the Staten in this. This kind of mark right here reminded me of Coletta. That's why. That's why. My mistake. You also do this, an issue in this 12 issue maxi series. He drew the cover and the interiors. Great Batman. Great moody Hawkman. You never see stuff like this. Like you might have seen this in Born Again when Mazzucchelli was drawing the Avengers or something, but seeing this treatment again, when you're seeing like the Munoz treatment on superheroes, that to me is just fun. That's just, I mean, it's kind of dumb to frame it like that, but you're near a kid, you don't care. You just like, I personally like different versions of these characters. So to see this stuff is just so wonderful. And this is already not that Munoz. You know what I mean? Like he's still got his Giffen going on. This is just a one and done. Well, not one and done. This is number 11 in a 12-part story that makes no sense. Don't, I mean, good luck if you try to read that stuff, but it's basically an improv comic that the where the creative team changed every issue and they had no idea how it was going to end. Anyway, this is really cool. Old school Dr. Fate stuff. Great Wonder Woman. Just having him draw other characters is so cool. There's that Batman treatment, a Blue Beetle. Probably the first time he ever drew Blue Beetle. He could have drawn that profile. Come on. Come on, Keith. Drew the backup for this. Well, not a backup. This is an anthology annual. He only drew a segment. It's kind of bizarre. Like the Steve Mitchell. Yeah, he drew that page right there. This segment. It's very Keith. He probably batted this out in a weekend. Just a couple pages. Have someone else ink it. You're good. That looks to me like J.J. Birch, though, trying to do a Giffen. I don't think this is Giffen at all. But it might be. It might be. Who knows? Speaking of swiping, J.J. Birch, famous swiper. I mean, that's a guy, him and Rich Buckler, those are dudes who are like heavy, 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 heavy swipers to their deficit, I think. At least Giffen, I think, turned it around into something else. It was a passage he had to go through. And people don't forgive. If you're against it, if you're just a straight up like, that's stealing, that's just stealing. It's like, no, nothing's going to change your mind. You're not going to see it as a sort of like, you're not going to give him grace for going through this filter of development. You're just going to hold it against him forever. And I think that is unfair criticism. And also, if you look back in the scope of his entire career, he kind of did that to different degrees from the beginning to the very end. So that's just who he was, and he was a product of his world of comics at that time for 50 years. Anyway, he drew this back segment for a Legion of Superheroes annual. Again, the work is lessening a little bit. He's retreating a tiny, tiny bit. Ernie Colon inked this stuff. Pretty nice stuff. They make a pretty good team. This was obviously reprinted in that manner a year later. They stopped doing this like around this time. DC stopped doing this. Again, I don't know the numbers. I don't know if it was fruitful. I think if it was fruitful, they'd be doing it to this day. But let's see. You could tell the difference. Not too much of a difference. I mean, other than it's brighter and crisper here. Like I said, Baxter paper. We're in the home stretch. We're only going to cover this now. Son of Ambush Bug. This is the follow-up miniseries to the acclaimed first series. And already you could tell that it's a somber thing. He's kind of bummed out, craggly inking for the shirt. Overall, the tone is a depressed one. The tone is very depressed. Not very depressed. That's not fair. But as it goes along, you'll see again doing his manga shtick, pushing the form in this, mocking Ditko or Mr. A. It's got Munoz isms again. I mentioned last time his profiles are funny because that's a faux pas, right? I say avoid it if you can. However, Munoz did tons of profiles, and Giffen picked up on that too. So it was like a match made in heaven. So anyway, it's funny that this came out and it was 6 issues instead of 4. So it's not that they were milking it. They probably just had bigger expectations. You know, it's sort of like the first mini redo. There's not much more to it. It's going around the same territory. It's going over the same territory. No, this is fun stuff, little character bios written by Robert Loren Fleming. Oh yeah, then there's this ad for the first issue, or for the series, really, but that's an original piece of art right there. Him tap dancing, vaudeville type style. And again, I would see this ad in my Booster Gold comics before actually reading the real thing. I got 3 more issues. And what's interesting about this stuff is that, yes, it's 6 issues. By the way, it's like Loren Fleming is just going off. It's a fun thing that I'm glad exists. I don't know if Mike Carlin was right to make it seem like this would have been better served as an in-house zine. Interesting about this is that, Two-Face appears, Ambush Bug is in hot water for some reason, for caring too much. I don't know. It's a pretty nice splash. But we have this segment by Steve Bissette of Swamp Thing fame. At the time, he had just come off the 50th issue, and I don't know who got him to draw these 4 pages, but when he turned in his voucher to get paid, the editor of Ambush Bug, Julie Schwartz, was appalled at how little he had been getting paid over at Swamp Thing. So he gave him Keith Giffen's rate. He gave him the Keith Giffen rate for these 4 pages. And as Steve Bissette tells it, it was extraordinarily high. It was another ballpark. And that's what I'm saying. Keith Giffen was a star. He was getting paid top rate. He was a star. And he got busted swiping, and people don't like that. There's that stigma that existed back then. It exists now. I mean, now it's you get people who are straight up tracing or using digital advances to make it easier. Or let's not even talk about AI applications. But this is pretty interesting. This is a 40s golden age. He doesn't do that too often, unless it's again for like Superman one shots, or a pretty cool evolution of the way Ambush Bug appeared and then turned into, from buff superhero villain to just a goofy, hey, kind of like the Tick or something, or Flaming Carrot, like one of those, carrying the absurdist tradition of comic books. And then now he's just pretty much Keith Giffen in a wrinkly shirt. That's the vibe I'm getting. That's the vibe we're getting. And he's let out of jail. He was being let out of the DC universe, essentially. So it is sort of a meta commentary. You never see his face, to the point where he just becomes a graph. And then it devolves into children's art. And then just the end of the series is kind of what, like when this is a callback to like when televisions would just stop at a certain part of the night, it would just go into this screen and this loud beeping sound. So yeah, the show's over. The show is over. And by the way, this got a review in the Amazing Heroes. Not favorable. Not favorable. They were not happy with this. They were saying again, it's just it's good, but it's not as innovative as the first one. All right, so well, that wraps this up, except we're really just going to end it on this note. Let's see if I could fit this. Let's see. Let's see how this works. Let me give it the proper space. There we go. There we go. You see that? This is a huge calendar drawn by Keith Giffen. Well, and a bunch of other artists, but he got the December. Ambush Bug looks pretty happy. He looks pretty happy. This was we're bringing in the new year. This is 1986. Figured it was an appropriate way to end this episode. Colored by Greg Theakston. That's right. Inked by Oxner. Now, I always saw this. Look at this. First of all, let's drink in this Luke McDonnell and Jerry Ordway. What a great drawing. Let's see. I would always see it here in the back of comic books. I would always see this, and then I would notice that, oh, wait, there's a little whatchamacallit, little ambush bug right there, you know? So this is the actual size. This is huge. This is huge. I mean, there's no way I can't unfurl this in front of the camera, but it's also worth mentioning because it is a unique piece of art. It's great. Now, what do I have here? Oh, this is the same thing. Same thing on newsprint. Again, I'm just trying to compare the printing techniques here. And of course, this I would get from my, you guessed it, Booster Gold. That's the collection I had when I was a kid. By the way, ink signed by Dan Jurgens. Best wishes. I didn't get that signed. That's the way it was how I acquired it. I forgot how, but anyway, this is a great piece of art. And it's a good way to just end this episode, which was awesome. It was massive. There was a lot to cover. We're gonna see his comeback because he's going away for a little bit, but he's gonna be back pretty soon, drawing for Marvel, doing some really interesting stuff at Marvel, and coming back to DC in a big way. Like, I mean, he was like, you ain't seen nothing yet. Like, I have some great ideas coming up. And it's gonna speak to so many other different facets of his personality and his career. And there's just gonna be so much to uncover. Again, thank you so much for showing up and going over this stuff with me in such detail. I hope you're digging it. I hope you go out and seek these comics out because they're just fantastic. I cannot wait to do the next one. I almost want to do it right now, but for the sake of time, I appreciate you being here even this long. So again, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Fiffe Files. That's the name of this show. Michelle. Fiffe Files.